that's been at the forefront of a lot of our minds for the last year or two. And it is a very large topic. There's no way to actually cover all of it. So this is just a couple thoughts to go through. For us, as a producer, sustainability starts with the land and land stewardship and vineyard management. And there's, aside from the reasons of doing it because it's the right thing to do, it's also, there's a certain bit of selfishness to it too, as well, for any producer, which is that if you don't take care of the land, then you have nothing to produce, your terroir goes to shit, and your product tastes like shit. So, but what encompasses the land? It's like, okay, it could be anything. It's your farms, it's your vineyards, it's your orchards, it's your fields. Anywhere that you derive the raw material for fermentation and then distillation. So, for us, a lot of it comes down to vineyard management. What else do you do with vineyard management? You think of vineyard management, and it's like, oh, it's the guys, working the trellises and setting the canes, and actually working on the vines themselves. And yes, that is part of it. But also, really what you're trying to do is you're trying to provide the conditions to maximize the quality and yield of whatever it is that you're trying to grow, right? And this is true of any farm, of any type of farm. You're trying to maximize something. And by maximizing one crop, you are necessarily trying to keep out other crops. And and sometimes those are things that are as easily undesirable as weeds, or sometimes it's like, oh, we have this vineyard and wheat wants to grow here too, but we don't want the wheat. But wheat's useful. Oh well, we're still gonna try and keep the wheat out. But it's never, no one's ever looked at a field and said, there's 4 crops going there at once. That's really awesome, because it doesn't work that way. It's like, that was a waste, and that's inefficient, and it's not what we're aiming for. So then, unfortunately, what do you do to keep one crop dominant? Okay, so the battle days, herbicides galore, right? You just spray everywhere. You're using Roundup, egg cancer. Thank you very much for that one. And it's very hands-on. It's very labor intensive. It's very chemical intensive. It's herbicides. It's pesticides. It's fertilizing in certain ways. It's and you're doing a lot. You're manipulating the land a lot. And as well, previously, initially it was just like, oh, whatever chemicals that we're using, it works. Okay, great, it works. But you don't really think of, there was no thought of what's the long-term effect of using these chemicals? How persistent are they? Will they break down? And when they break down, how do they break down? What does it break down into? And then how long do the components that it breaks down into stay either in the soil, in the water supply, or in the plants themselves if they're perennials like vines. So, like I said, you have runoff and concentration toxins, and even more so was the fact that over time you needed to use more and more chemicals, because the diminishing returns, you would gain resistance. It's like anything else, in nature, evolutionarily, it's going to figure a way to get around, but whatever it is that you're doing to it. And then in conservation of the soil itself, there's actually pretty limited ground cover, which seems really dumb for me, coming from a cognac producer that's in a really, really tiny sub-region, in Grand Champagne. We're like, you want to wash away our dirt? That's a terrible idea. We don't have new dirt here. This place is old. It's really, really old. and it's a limited amount of acreage that we can use. So, and again, but then, again, you're managing that ground cover. In the battle days, it's like, okay, you would let one row grow cover, you would spray herbicide on the next row, and then underneath all the vines, you would have even more herbicide to manage. That was what was considered ground cover management. So today, it's a lot better because Cognac is part of France, part of the EU. The usage of herbicides and pesticides is way down, and there is a huge increase in the amount of cover and ground cover and how it is and how it's managed. So it's still one row is allowed to grow cover, but then the next row, instead of spraying it, they plow it under so that it forms fertilizer. Still spraying underneath the vines though to keep it bare so that there's nothing competing with the vines. So, the future. So, by the way, this is what our lawnmower looks like at Ferrand. It's really weird. So, at Ferrand, what we're doing, this is in cooperation with the BNIC, which is a regulatory body for cognac. We've got several experiments going, plus what we're hoping will become, best practices going forward. For the ground cover, we're doing one row of regular grass that's just allowed to grow, and that's wild. And then the next row, instead of plowing it under or stripping it down, we're actually planting a very specific grass that's got really deep tap roots so that it aerates the soil. And then that alternates each year. One row and then the other. And then the other nice thing too is that, so that's allowed to grow all through the winter and early spring, and then in late spring, when the vines start to actually bud and sprout out new leaves and things like that, we then just go down and flatten it, and it provides a mulch that kills off all the weeds that are trying to come in, and then by killing up the weeds, provides even more fertilizer and compost. Eventually, hopefully long term, this is going to eliminate completely the need for chemical fertilizers in our vineyards. And as well, we're hoping that within 2 years, we're not going to need to use herbicide at all anymore. The mowers, by the way, this weird ass mower is the alternative to spraying underneath the vines so that there's nothing not competing with the vines. I have no idea who invented that. It's really impressive. Also, going forward, sheep, yay, sheep. There are several integrated farms out there that integrate livestock and crops, whatever crop it is that you're growing. And one of them in particular, it's called the Schaffner Family Orchard. It's outside of Oroville, California. It's a former agricultural research station that belonged to UC Berkeley. And it was bought and turned into a farm. It's part of it is a olive orchard, and they run goats through it first to eat all the shrubbery. Yes. Just think of all the shrubbery goats right now. And then they run cattle through to mow down the soil, and then they run chickens through in mobile hen coops. And so before we went to sheep, Alexander, our owner, really wanted chickens, so we told him it wasn't possible. I hope no one tells him that it is possible, because otherwise we're going back to chickens. And so out of this orchard they get olives, obviously, but then they get goats, and goat milk, cheese, goat meat, things like that. The cattle, it's obviously, it's really nice, high-end all grass-fed cattle that comes out of it. And then the chickens, it's all free, you generate a free range of eggs and chickens all year long. So there is a lot of positives to things like this. So now we are using sheep. I hope you like the little cartoons there. They're the ones that were free. And we have, because we're kind of assholes, we decided to name them after the companies that we're hoping to put out of business. Yeah. It takes about 5 sheep to manage and mow down the grass in 1 hectare of production. And hopefully, I'm only joking a little bit when I say that we might produce scarves and stuff. I really hope no France reads this because they might do it.
How do you keep the sheep from actually eating the vines?
So they won't eat vines. Goats will, which is why I went with sheep. These are sheep from Shropshire in England.
What is
And
that? Which one?
from Shropshire. And so they will only eat grass. They won't go after the vines. They won't go after the bark. We thought about goats initially, and vines look like shrubbery. And as far as the goat's concerned, that's good eating. So that's not going to work. The other really good thing too about moving to soil or to sheep is that obviously they provide fertilizer of their own. Also, it's much lower impact on the earth itself. You're not driving a tractor down as often, so you're not compacting the soil, so that you're not driving out the oxygen. All that work you put into aerating the soil earlier, is not being undone. So, what else do we do? So fallowing, Maison Ferrand owns 180 hectares of vineyard. We allow 30 hectares to be fallow at any given time, which is a pretty large rotation. Most other cognac producers are down in the 15 to 20 hectare range compared to for a similar amount of acreage. All the fallow acreage is allowed to.
Can you explain fallow?
So you're not using it for production. Yeah, it's just allowed to lie. So all of our fallow land is then planted with flowering plants, so that it attracts bees. 2 reasons: one, we want to keep the bees happy and well fed. But the other is, you still have to use a little bit of sulfur for pest management at certain points in the spring on vines. Unfortunately, that's one that I don't think anyone is ever going to be able to get away from. The good news is that at least sulfur is natural and it doesn't really affect the water supply. But we do continually keep testing to make sure that the concentration of the soil doesn't get high at all. But it distracts, by having those that flowering acreage, it distracts the bees from going to the vines until later when we actually want them to. It goes and does the field, there's flowers and it's pretty and it's very idyllic. And then the other thing that we're trying to do is we're trying to replace insecticides and pesticides with pheromone diffusion. This is totally experimental right now, but we have 4 plots where we have boxes that just give off a very specific targeted insect pheromone that prevents. There's 2 particular pests that we're worried about, and it prevents them from getting together and having, laying eggs and fertilizing eggs, which is great. It's nice. It's their own pheromones that we're using against them. So it's nothing that hopefully they're ever going to grow out of, which will be nice, and it will let us eliminate. The goal is to eliminate all pesticides and insecticides going forward.
Rocky, is anyone else doing pheromone diffusion, like in Cognac region?
Not in the Cognac region, as far as we know.
For wine?
There's a couple other, like in Bordeaux and Burgundy, there are. But what we're the BNIC's like test case.
Okay.
So it's really weird is that the BNIC has like this whole like research station. And when you drive by it, like people say, oh look, that's where they do cognac research. And you're like, but do you remember when Charlie Brown goes to France? And there's the Chateau of the Bad Neighbor. That's what the BNIC research station looks like, complete with clouds and lightning. Okay, so then, waste management. There's two, for any alcohol producer, there's two, and especially a distiller, there's 2 points of waste that you really need, that are large. One is your immediate post-fermentation waste, whether you're mashing, whether you have grapes, anything, whatever it is that you're fermenting, right? This stuff is the easy stuff to get rid of. Anyone who just dumps this stuff is an asshole, just flat out. You can, if you're producing whiskey, you can find a farmer in 5 minutes who will be happy to take your spent mash off of you. You put on Craigslist, you will have a stampede. In our case, because we use grapes, we have produced what's called Mark, and we send for us we send Alto Bordeaux. There is an industrial alcohol producer there that does a secondary fermentation on it, turns it into industrial scale alcohol. We found out that they use it for fancy cosmetics like L'Oreal. So
that you can't make grappa.
you can. So Mark is also the name for French grappa. You can do it for that, but then again, you still have organic waste left over, And again, but then you can compost that. You can also send it again to these same guys, and they can still run it through.
And livestock will need it, the byproducts as well?
After a second fermentation, not really. The alcohol is too high. That's residual in it. You want to be able to send it through this way and strip it out. The other major point of waste that we need to think about is vinasse. Vinasse is the spent, it's the waste in the still after you're done distilling. So, previously, traditionally, there's a process called vinasse bordelaise, where you just take it and you spray it over your fields, and it's a good fertilizer. Problem is it's hard to control. You can't control the concentrations very well. And you inevitably produce more than you actually want to use for fertilizer. So what else can you do with it? The other problem too is that, how many here have been to Maker's Mark? Okay, so when you see the still at Maker's Mark, right, and they show you that giant ball of copper wool that stick in the bottom of the still at the beginning of the distillation season, and then at the end of the distillation season, that's all gone. That copper went somewhere. 2 places. One, a little bit went into your booze. 2 is, really tiny amounts. 2 is that it then goes out in the vinasse, in that distillery waste. So when you spray that on your fields, over time it does build up, and you get heavy metal buildup in the earth. Depending on the type of soil, there are some types of soil that just deal with it really well and actually want it. If you have heavy clay and loam soils, they're just like, yeah, we'll take that copper, we'll take that iron, no problem, you got it. But like in our case, where we have a high chalk soil, it just stays there, and over time it just builds up. So we don't want that. Maison Ferrand now, along with several other cognac producers, and this is becoming the standard within cognac production. We participate in a co-op that sends all our vinasse to a biomethanization plant, where all the vinasse goes into a digester, into a bioreactor, and is turned into usable methane. And then the solids are easily recoverable. And given the price of copper right now, they want to recover those solids. Hopefully, biomethanization becomes a global standard. And if we can make this work, for distillery waste, really any organic waste can also be sent to biomethanization. So that's us in a nutshell at this point. Next, though, is some, this is coming, I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. One is that a lot of the things that we do now that we talk about for sustainability, it's at an individual level, it's at a very micro level. It's what are we doing at each bar? What are we doing, at each individual distillery? How do we zoom out and look at this as an entire industry? And how do we, what is it that we can do? There are no like big easy answers that that we're going to come up with today, but this is just something that kind of I would like everyone to noodle on and just be a little bit aware of. There's a lot of stuff out there. Soraya does a lot of work in the sustainability realm, and they are really great about sharing information. Obviously, since we go through the BNIC, all that information is government knowledge, so it's public knowledge. But as everyone experiments and comes up with better ideas, hopefully everyone will share their data for improving sustainability and for reducing their impacts. But the other thing too is that we need to consider our industry as a whole. Everything that we can do to be as sustainable as possible, and this is the key here. It's as sustainable as possible. There's nothing about what we do that is actually sustainable. There's one industry in the world that's sustainable. That's subsistence farming. Like everything else has an impact. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to mitigate your impact to within the Earth's ability to process it and cycle it and make it good. There's nothing else that man does that has no impact. Everything we do has an impact. Even subsistence farming done wrong has a massive impact. So a couple areas to consider. One is distribution itself. We're shipping all this stuff around the world. As much as possible, obviously, people try to ship things by sea, which is the most efficient way of shipping, except for there's one giant problem there, which is high sulfur fuel oil and diesel. When you have ships that are transiting, areas with less regulation, even though the whole world is supposed to transition over to low sulfur diesel and fuel oil for ships, this isn't necessarily in practice. And also it's just not available everywhere yet. So the shipping industry has two things around that. One is obviously they're trying to push for everyone to get low sulfur diesel and fuel oil available to them. There's a big problem with that though. It costs 10 times as much as high sulfur fuel oil. So if you're running a ship that needs 1 million gallons of fuel, and you can save, basically 90% on your fuel bill, you're looking really hard at that. It's a tough temptation. The other thing also is they have scrubbers installed in their exhaust systems now. And the exhaust system will capture all of that sulfur dioxide. The problem is that once you capture the sulfur dioxide, you are supposed to, when you pull into a port that has the facilities to process it, you are supposed to then dump it there and pay for that processing. Obviously, it costs money. The other thing you can do is, we mysteriously didn't generate any sulfur while we were transitioning the high seas. Who knew? You just dump it. This is obviously not the greatest thing in the world. There are ways around that. One is making sure that, and this is really tough, working with logistics managers, is making sure that you use shipping companies that are using ships that are on routes that go from developed nation to developed nation, so that there's no shenanigans. You can only use low sulfur fuel oil. You can't have dumped it anywhere, have dumped it anywhere, because they will have tracked it. They will know what you started out with. They will know what you ended up with. So, for us, the nice part is, okay, coming from Europe and so EU, shipping directly to the US, yes, that's a straight line route. And, there's no shenanigans possible, but when we're shipping to Asia, we know like, somewhere they're gonna stop around the Horn of Africa, or Djibouti, or Cape Town, and the temptation to refuel there with high sulfur fuel is really high. So, something to think about there. Also, the last mile, your own individual distributors wherever you live. UPS and FedEx are investing really, really heavily in new fleets of hybrid and electric trucks. And there are huge tax breaks associated with this. This is something that, potentially going forward over time, we can work with our distributors to be like, hey, what are you doing for your own fleet renewal? What vehicles are you buying or leasing that are going to be as efficient and as clean as possible? Again, the whole thing here is that it's as possible. The EU has a goal of being carbon neutral by 2050. They're going to ban internal combustion by 2034, which is a hell of a goal. I hope it works. I don't know if it can, but it's a hell of a thing. So that's on the distribution end, and then POS, swag, everything that that we produce as brands or that you produce as bars for your customers. Every time I see a pile of swag or POS that gets thrown away, my heart just hurts. I'm just like, aside from the fact that, oh man, I spent money on that, it's the fact that that's just going in the trash, and I produced it and I contributed, to the waste stream here, and that sucks. So,
Does that drive brands to put out better POS?
you hope so. At the same time, like for us, I don't know if you've ever, if you noticed, like we don't do that much POS, right? But what POS we do, we're hoping that it's meaningful and that you want to keep, And so I don't, over the last several years, I've pushed as much as we don't print as much material as we used to. Everything is, please let me email this to you. I don't want it. And then if you need a copy, yes, I will print one copy for you. That will be nice. But I don't want to print off like hundreds of copies and then just toss them hopefully into the recycling bin. But whatever. Or things like bar mats. Like the age of brands just handing out buttloads of bar mats. So first of all, for a lot of us within the segment of the industry that that a lot of us are in, we're working more and more in bars where where there are drainage rails and we don't need bar mats anymore, and that's nice. Really like that. It's a nice design choice and it eliminates our piece of waste. Part of the problem is that the vulcanized rubber that bar mats are made from are only slightly less recyclable than tires. So
what examples of POS that you think are like sustainable and like actually used in sets?
I mean, but that's in a lot of ways that's up to each brand, right? And up to the interaction of the brand with you, as a consumer, as a bartender, whatever, what is it that you want, but not just want, but you're going to continue to use. Like if I give you a crap T-shirt, you're just going to wear it once and then toss it, right? But if I spend a little more and actually make it a nice T-shirt, you're going to wear it again. And so that is the thought. But then the flip side of that is then, obviously we answer to accountants and marketing people who go, no, we need to find a way to produce 5,000 of these. I'm like, why do we want to produce 5,000? Let's produce 500 and make it something that people actually want and will continue to use. So there's going forward, there's going to be a lot of give and take with that. That's going to be a conversation that every brand is going to need to have, with their customers, with all of y'all, and hopefully, we eliminate the things that are just throwaway.
Do you think this we can use bartenders to tell brands can you
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I used to continuously tell me like, I have enough whatever to last me for a lifetime. Please never make this ever again.
Yeah.
You know? And, or, it's like, I get it, consumers like this, make enough for consumers. You don't need to make extra for us.
So I think part is having social responsibility and organizing things like maybe clothing drives, where all the
Right.
bartenders come together and
Absolutely.
donate their old t-shirts to communities or whatever it may be. Just embodying that social responsibility together.
Absolutely. And then there's an interesting thing, and this is really, really theoretical. Evolving regulations so that they can be more environmentally friendly and reduce waste. And by this, what I mean is there's a balance that needs to be struck between how everything about how certain products are regulated, especially when you have a DO. Let's take tequila for example, right? Tequila must be bottled in Mexico before it can leave. It has to be bottled in a tequila producing region. And then that means that inevitably you're also shipping glass. And, you know, but we're equally as guilty of that as well. Most products out there, you know, you're shipping the glass as well. And there's a couple things that. One is, you know, by regulatory strictures, you have to ship it already bottled. But also, it's a matter of product integrity and quality control and safety, making sure that no one's adulterating your product, right? In a perfect world, we would be able to track where everything goes, and that, you know, and that the product that you get, that you buy at the end is exactly what it is that you think it is. You know, and for all the controls that we already have in place, you know, shenanigans still happen. I mean, I'm sure everyone remembers last year when that guy that operated 40 Applebee's in upstate New York was switching out alcohol, right? So there's a balance to be struck there, but, you know, as we go forward, this is something for us to think about, you know, every time like a GI or a DL comes up for review. You know, what can we do? You know, how do we reduce waste? Is it possible to institute a system where, yes, we can ship in tankers or we can ship in totes, and then bottle at the point of use? You know, how much
You know, that gets back to the pre-bottling days.
Right.
When you would just buy a barrel.
just send barrels. Yeah.
I think an issue that comes up here in the United States is a lot of regulations that come up, or a lot of legislation that comes up that is like pro-sustainability and like anti-waste, gets labeled by lobbyists as actually anti-agriculture and like anti-farmer, because it increases the work that farmers have to do
Sure.
around the country. So especially with our current legislation, our current administration, a lot of those things get labeled like really badly, so we can't even move forward with that because it seems like anti-agriculture. Even though
Right.
we're trying to.
Well, and the reality is that, you know, the farm bill in the U.S. needs to be basically ripped up and start over. We're never. That's a whole long conversation on its own.
So regulate Tide Pods though.
Yeah, tide laws. Well, that's the other. Tide house laws are also going to be whether or not you want to allow, you know, going back to the day of like, you know, letting you know, your brewer or your distiller own not just like one or two bars. You know, it's your microbrewery, it's your micro distillery, but to have whole chains, right? It's obviously it's bad for competition. But yes, everyone's always looking for more integration because you make money.
When powering the plants, what do you use? Do you still use gas and coal, or are you trying to go towards more solar powered or green emissions when you're doing the distillation process?
So for us, we use natural gas. And things like going forward, for us, it's going to become a closed loop because we're buying the gas back from the biomethanization plant.
Okay.
So, And again, but we're not like the only ones who can do that. Like, you know, in agave production, in sugarcane production, you can burn your bagasse. You know, that is a byproduct of your fermentation process.
Would that then be cheaper for you in the long run, just because you're buying back pretty much the same product?
We were not sure yet.
Did it just start?
It's only a couple of years old, and the process, they're still working, like the yield grows every year. Like it's still in its infancy where it's trying to become more efficient and, you know, and more productive. One of the hardest parts about any of these biometallization and biodigester projects is, so the EU is way ahead on it, and the US only got like really 4 large-scale pilot projects going, and they kind of get poo-pooed all the time, which is really, really bad. Because what we want to do, what could be possible there is that you could also use it to eliminate a huge pollution stream from agriculture. You know, you consider every livestock operation produces huge amounts of manure, and you have these giant manure ponds. And yes, you can use some of it for fertilizer. You produce way more than you'll ever need for fertilizer, right? But it can all go into a digester and turn it into methane, and then nice dry compost. So, but that's also a matter of investment and getting, you know, whether or not we're going to get to the point where governments at different levels, not just federal, but, you know, state and local, are willing to invest in that and give the tax credits to let that go forward.
That's interesting to hear, kind of starting to think about this as an agricultural product and not a party drug. But I was curious, and when you're talking about, you know, trying to pursue innovation and things, if it's all right with you, I would be interested to hear what people are doing, even just on like very briefly, on a very small scale. If anybody does something at their bar that they haven't heard of, or that they're especially proud of, that they think helps decrease their footprint.
The bar that I run in Pittsburgh, we only use 16-ounce cans, and we have can crushers that were custom fabricated for us. We compost all of our citrus that goes into our flower pots up front and everything. Yeah, and our waste now is at a point that we no longer need a dumpster that costs $150 a month. So at the end of next year, we should be able to pay for everyone's health care too, which is pretty dope.
That's awesome.
We can't even get them to pick up our recycling.
And that is also something that, what's really weird is in the US, recycling and composting, all of that is such a patchwork. Even in cities that you would think of like, oh, it's a major city, obviously they're gonna have their shit together and be able to pick up your recycling and pick up your yard waste. And like, no, that's not a thing unless you want to pay a whole bunch extra. You know, and it is definitely weird like that. And like Boston, for example, like relatively left-leaning, you know, Boston, and you know, you think it'd be a very green place, like municipal recycling. No, we don't have that. You can take it to the transfer station. Okay.
So, like, you know, like we have no recycling in New Orleans.
Right.
So it was reaching out onto Craigslist for local artists and glass blowers, and put up a donation station for them to come and pick up glass when we melt down and use their products. That was one way that I was.
Yeah, and there's also like.
Did you just create that yourself, or was that a thing that's like a program that already exists?
Oh, I just started reaching out to artists.
Because there's that glass blowing through the can.
Yeah.
There's also an insistence by, it's more consumers care more than we do about this, but like, you know, they want glass to be perfectly clear. You want to see what's in the bottle, you know, you want it to be pretty, you want it to be, and it's hard to make recycled glass not be cloudy, not have inclusions. You know, or really at the end of the day, if you want to recycle glass, like recycling it to brown glass or green glass is way, way easier than it is to going into clear glass. And that insistence on the aesthetics is also something that we need to consider going forward.
It sounds like with, current climate things, it's just very expensive and hard to want to do the right thing. When you have that World Cup supply, I want to recycle things. I want to not use, disposable straws. And I wish I personally knew more of how to fix that, in my own town, my own, city center things. I mean, we run a tiki bar,
Right.
things, and you can't have tiki without a fun silly straw.
No.
And we go through tons of these straws, so we would actually just save every straw, put them in a plastic bag, take them to our own houses, put in our recycling containers. Come to find out, the city won't even accept those, so they don't recycle them because the machines they use to recycle, they go right through the filtering and clog up their filters and stuff and clog up the machines, so they won't set the standard straws, it's not contained, so.
Right.
Try to, balance it by doing things like, never throwing out these leftover citrus garnish, you throw it in a big container, a little bit of sugar, turn it into oleo, use some punches, just try to do our part with that. And another thing I thought too, like, I know there are a few breweries out there that are LEED certified. I don't have anything like that in EU, but I think it would be a cool move. I know it's expensive to get certification done, and some breweries, have up the money to do it, and the understanding that, hey, we're gonna spend more money now in the initiation of this concept.
Right.
Save money in the back end, and then you have less of a carbon footprint, like Sierra Nevada does in Nashville. Like, there's a great example of platinum certified. They were doing, hey, we're only gonna do like silver. And Ken was like, screw that, we're gonna go platinum all the way. And I think I would like to see more distilleries doing that, more breweries doing that. And I mean, it's going to make, like you said, sustainability has an impact on the agriculture, on the farmer. It's going to help us all in the long run.
There's also, the thing is, with a lot of older producers, what you're also going to get, though, is also a resistance to, why should I pay to get certified? There's going to be a lot of, like, I already do it right. I have very low waste stream. I don't this, that, or the other thing. And so, like, you can be transparent about your practices. And I can just let you know what it is that I'm doing. Because there is a lot of resistance towards, like, why do I need to get organic or LEED certified? I already have a closed loop, or already have low impact. And so there does need to be a way as well to recognize, people who are doing that and not just getting certified. Because the flip side of certification is, like, LEED is hard to fake, but there's other certifications out there, especially when you're talking about organics and things like that. Like, the rise of factory organic farming is pretty, it's kind of like, wow, that happened. It's, in a lot of ways, I consider it like well mezcal. To me, well mezcal is a category that shouldn't exist. But we created it. That's our own damn fault. All of us in this room, we love this thing to death. And, so part of that question going forward is, how we make sure that as we move forward, we keep not just the technicality, but also the spirit of what it is that we're trying to do, what we're trying to accomplish in life as well.
You touched on being more expensive to be sustainable. I think that, a big thing for me was it's expensive, but if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem.
Right.
And you can use that, from a purely selfish level, you can advertise the fact that you're being sustainable, you're doing these things, you're paying for compost, you're paying for recycling, and that people will be drawn to your bar because they care about your cause and they keep it fun.
Yes.
So just piggybacking off of that too, I think that industry standards and what the industry is doing with distillers and producers, we're doing as much as we can on our part, where now it's more consumer based. Consumers love organic, whatever.
Right.
They don't really know what that means. So
Right.
what I would like to do when I go home taking from this is to reach out to outreach programs with people in my community that are doing it not from an industry standpoint, But like, there's a lot of things, like even with glass bottles that we're talking about, craft products or
Right.
craft projects that people can do, even trying to redecorate your bar if you have a little home bar or a smaller bar in the industry, decorating with those glass bottles.
Right.
It's easy to scrub off labels, whatever it is. Like, I know I'm doing that for Christmas just in my home.
Right.
You know what I mean? Putting little lights in there, whatever it is. But I think that's another part of the issue too, is that consumers think they know what organic or where the recycling is going, or even what they can do, but having the industry educate our clientele and
Right.
the people that come into our bar is very important.
Right.
And maybe starting from a standpoint of maybe reaching out to local organizations, local artists, starting there, starting little, and then maybe trying to get into government with that to just kind of have it be more of an education standpoint. You can't really do anything unless you really know.
Right.
You know?
And then there's things like, there's also older practices that used to be in play that why we need to re-examine and think about bringing back, like the breweries, right? Think about it. 40 years ago, you had a bottle deposit. You took your bottles back to the store, and they were washed and reused. They didn't even have to recycle them. You just reuse them, right? Why? I mean, there's a lot. I know why all the reasons that went away, but why don't we go back to that?
But how do you preserve the quality of the bottle? I mean, because in terms of, they tend to get degraded.
They do, but the thing, the same systems that they had at that time, they were just as it was ending, they were already introducing laser scanning into all the bottles, so that you could check the integrity of the bottle. Even how it'd be even easier.
Isn't there a country that's actually paying people to deposit their recyclables back?
They did that.
Yeah, was it the US or was that?
It happens lots of places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was to have it like in your bar or something like,
Right.
hey, it's
Offer
throwing
like
this.
second pack
Yeah.
or like
Or
if somebody
get it
brings in
like-
like.
Yeah, I mean, bottle deposits, can deposits still happen in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I was just gonna go back to the swag piece. Maybe it'd be a cool thing for brands to help them promote this. Maybe things like the glass cutters that
Mhm.
turn empty bottles into glassware. You can recycle that with your bar. Things like maybe recycling bins or whatever it may be to just help us have
Yes.
the tools to.
I'm working on a composting bin.
Yes, exactly.
Like, I have this idea, none of us really use bar top caddies, Carnage trays anymore. But, not like the big, ugly old one that you would get from cash and carry, right?
Yeah.
But within that same footprint, you can have one that looks nice that you can use for your compost bin.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So, working on that, we'll see how far I can go.
Put their fingers in that.
Yeah. And that will also make me happy.
One thing we did in Nashville, because all our bars is installed independent, it was really expensive to get our compost picked up and recycling picked up, was we kind of created a co-op where it was just like we're all on the same road, and we convinced the compost people to come to at least one place in East Nashville where then everyone could bring their spent fruit and everything else. We just had a parking lot where we could bring it all, so like mitigating the cost, because it was really expensive to convince them to come out.
Right.
But we all kind of partnered together, and they ended up doing it for free just because it was like 10 of us bars.
Right.
Being like, hey, we're gonna keep calling you every 3 days until.
Right, it's actually economically feasible for them.
Yeah, so it was a lot easier, so it helps mitigate costs too.
We have this cute little company called Candles with a Cause, and they collect, it has to be local. We have a local beer company that does bombers, and then local spirit companies, and they collect wine. It's like every 10 or 12 that you drop off, they put candles into these bottles, they like cut off the top. And then for every 10 that you drop off, they give you a candle, which is really incentivizing for people. And then a portion of those proceeds that they sell the candles for, they all have like different philanthropies that they give to. It's pretty awesome.
That's pretty awesome.
Pretty dope.
Do they reuse the candles at the candle jars?
Yeah, you can bring them back.
Dope. That's awesome.
Yeah.
We also have a place that does that called Rewind.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's nice. All right, gotta wrap up here. Any last questions?
Just, I don't know if this is a thing, and then it's kind of two-part. Is there, just like there's certifications for breweries and distilleries, are there bar certifications where they can say like, you could have like a directory saying these 3 bars are this level of sustainability, and if there isn't, is that something that a brand
Yes,
can figure out?
there's-
If I'm a brand, especially if you guys are in that direction,
Sort
coming
of.
in and being like, Ferrand,
Yeah,
that's
sort of.
like,
Restaurants, so and therefore by extension bars, can pursue Oregon TILF certification. And so they look at how much you're composting, what your waste stream is like, you know.
what's it called again?
Oregon TILF.
Like the state of Oregon,
Yep,
in tilt.
TILF, TILTH. And they will they will come in and examine your practices. You know, how green are you? How you know, how much of your waste is recycled or composted? And then also they also look at things like how much of your product is local, which goes into part of the certification, which for a restaurant obviously is much easier. For a bar it's a lot harder. So that's something too that they would have to have. I think they were going to have that they would have to modify at some point if bars are going to start coming to them. But that's definitely people to talk to.
But it makes sense because like if we're getting product from brands, the emissions from it coming overseas alone versus getting something within your own city.
Right. Well, the strange part is though, and this is just Cognac, right? So Cognac sits on the river Charente, which is a major river that goes straight up to Bordeaux, which is a major port. From Bordeaux, you get on a ship and if you're coming to a port city, your emissions are really low at that point because you've shipped, and at that point you have shipped entirely on vessels that have had to comply with EU regulations. So there's a weird thing there where you can go, oh, if it's coming directly, so like it's coming here, right? If it's coming directly from France, you're like, okay, my emission impact is actually lower than if I was trucking bourbon over from Louisville.
But that's if you are in a port city.
That's if you are a port city.
If you're not in a port city, you're coming across and you're being
right, and that's also something that going forward, a larger level conversation with like logistics managers, like, hey, how do we get off of trucks and onto trains? And this is a real pie in the sky thing, but someday hopefully the U.S. will be able to electrify their train network like the rest of the world.
On that dismal note. All right, so thanks, Rocky. These